heard that Howard Stern, SiriusXM, is not renewing his gazillion-dollar contract. I don't think anybody's playing any violins for him. He's made plenty of money. But they're done. They're not going to continue, so he's out at SiriusXM. And a lot of people are talking about it. Some are saying he's fired. And I don't think it really much matters after all these years of all the money he's made. And he's been very successful. And he used to be funny. But this is Glenn Beck's take on the real reason why he believes that SiriusXM said, no more Howard. So we're going to listen to Glenn Beck.
Howard Stern no longer being wanted at XM. XM is like, yeah, he's not really worth his $100 billion contract. And so they're not going to renew. And I was thinking about Howard today because when I was 18 or 19 years old, 18, I was working at WPGC in Washington, D.C., which was a huge radio station. And it was right there in the nation's capital. And for years, it had been number one. And then Howard Stern came along. And Howard Stern took everything and turned everything upside down. And when the Florida airline, like Sunshine Airlines or something, I can't remember what it was, but it plowed into the 14th Street Bridge. It was taking off from Reagan National Airport, not called Reagan back then, just National. And I think it couldn't get enough height or something, and it crashed right into the 14th Street Bridge. And while they were digging bodies out of the Potomac, he called the airline and tried to book a seat live on the air, tried to book a seat to the 14th Street Bridge. Would like to buy a ticket, please? Yes, sure. Where are you going? The 14th Street Bridge. And the person just fell apart. And it was so horrible. But everybody was listening to him because he was, I think you were the one, Jason, that said he was like punk rock. Yeah. You didn't necessarily listen to punk rock because you liked punk rock. You listened because nobody else was saying anything like that. Nobody else was doing anything like that.
So I remember the plane crash. I remember that incident when it happened. I don't necessarily remember so much the Howard Stern live at the time. I heard of him. I had listened to him. I had heard clips. I didn't listen to him all the time, but I was very familiar with him. And as an 18-year-old, because me and Glenn are pretty much the same age. He said he was 18. I looked it up. It was Air Florida Flight 90. It happened in 1982. And I turned 18 in 1982 in October of that year. So Glenn saying he was 18. So we're pretty much the same age. So I have a clear recollection of Glenn's account of the chronological order of events that because we're pretty much the same age. But he's right. Howard Stern, and if you look at his whole career, the key thing, and Glenn just alluded to it, is why the listenership was so high and why he ultimately got that huge contract with SiriusXM later on was people just tuned in. They listened longer. And I think they did studies where the people that liked him, that were fans of Howard Stern, listened longer because they never knew what he was going to say. Just like he alluded to some of the outrageous things he would do, the blackface, the whole shtick. He would sensationalize everything, and people stayed tuned longer because they wanted to hear what he was going to say next. Ironically, the people that didn't like Howard Stern, that found him repulsive, listened also for the same exact reason. Now, they may have been repulsed by what he was saying, but they too listened longer because they wanted to hear what he was going to say. So from a marketing standpoint, it was a win-win. And ultimately, that's what ratings are, is eyeballs, and can you keep them paying attention? So Glenn's account is spot on about the events that took place back then. But then he continues on.
Like that. And he became wildly popular, then went up to WNBC Radio and totally changed that. Don Imus, who was actually a class act and very, very intelligent, hated Howard Stern, and Howard Stern hated him because, you know, at the time, well, they're just from a different generation. No, no. Howard did so much to destroy our culture. And it's funny that he embraces now people like Al Gore and the left and big government, because he was always anti-government, always. And the people that, you know, were the leaders against Howard Stern's show were not people like me. They were people like Al and Tipper Gore. And now he embraces all of those people and embraces this big government. The one thing that Howard Stern did do is he fought the government and won. Most times he won. And he was a trailblazer for freedom of speech, but he was also a trailblazer for just degrading of our society, the degrading of women and relationships and everything else.
And he's very right on that too, because I do remember the Al Tipper Gore reference. He's talking about because Glenn Beck's been in radio forever, and the Al Tipper Gore reference. I think Tipper was spearheading. They were trying to put these advisory labels on music albums. I don't know if it was exclusive to rap, but rap really brought it in stronger than some of the. I mean, there's been a lot of obnoxious lyrics in some music. You can say hard rock, heavy metal, but rap really ratcheted up to another level where there was a lot of. He talked about degradation of society. There was a lot of degrading things, and but anyway, Tipper was a big spearheading of the advisory labels, and there was a big battle of music saying, "Ah, no, it's the freedom of speech, all that stuff." But he's so far spot on the analysis and the chronology of the history of Howard up to this point.
And he was I think he was a pox on our culture for a very long time. He was an innovator, to be sure. And then he seemed to, I don't know, right around 2000, between 2010 or so, he started to just concentrate on interviews, and he became one of the best interviewers of anybody on radio or television. And I know because he interviewed me one time, and I was 20 minutes into it, and my guard was way up, and I was 20 minutes into it, and I stopped, and I realized I was telling him stuff that I hadn't told anybody before, and I thought, what the hell am I doing? This guy is a magician. He's a hypnotist. He can just make you so comfortable, and that's what made him a great interviewer. He could make you feel so comfortable, and that you would just share everything. And so he got great interviews. And then after COVID, I think he went insane. I really do. I think COVID radicalized him into this big state monster. I mean, the 20-year-old Howard Stern would be disgusted with the 70-year-old Howard Stern. But that's the way a lot of these, I can't put him in the hippie category, but he is of that age or close to that age, to where the younger self would be disgusted by the big state government guy that he has become, to where, you can scoop up anybody and just tell them exactly, what they're going to inject into their body and everything else. And it's crazy. He went nuts. And once again, this is not Donald Trump. Donald Trump, I think, was a fan of his. Donald Trump was a regular on his show for a very long time. And Howard Stern loved him until he became president of the United States. And then, of course, because he was on his journey of just becoming this diehard Democrat, and not the kind of Democrat that was for him, if there were any. I shouldn't say Democrat. Liberal. He was always liberal and believed that you could say whatever you want, do whatever you want. I don't have a responsibility for society and everything else. And that's fine, whatever. I disagree with you, but fine. But he became this Democrat. And so as soon as Donald Trump became the candidate, he went nuts and never changed on that. And then COVID happened, and he went even crazier. And it just was announced, I think it was announced yesterday, that XM has just said, okay, enough is enough.
I couldn't agree more. I think he's spot on. I think he goes through the chronology of Howard Stern's career and his interpretation. I can't disagree with anything. I followed along. I remember the interviews. I think he's right about the interview. I remember watching some of the interviews, and he's right. And ironically, Glenn was saying his guard was way up. So he's being interviewed by Howard Stern with his guard way up, and he's still just revealing things that he otherwise normally wouldn't reveal. So that is true, and he's giving him credit for that. So I think that's the appeal of Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is a great interviewer because he puts you at ease. He's just a regular guy with curiosity and just having a conversation. And I think people are drawn to that. There's a certain authenticity that people say, hey, I find that very appealing. So I think his analysis is spot on. And the whole COVID stuff, don't get me started on that. I'm in total agreement with Glenn. I think he did go crazy, but really half the country went crazy. There was a huge chasm that happened during COVID, and I call it the response. The government response was what I refer to as an iatrogenic response. It's a fancy word I learned from watching Dr. Phil. Basically, iatrogenesis is in simplest terms, the cure is worse than the disease. So if a doctor prescribes a procedure or a prescription for a certain ailment, and it ends up that procedure or prescription causes more damage than the underlying symptom that they were trying to remedy. That's the term that they use. They call that iatrogenesis. Well, I look at COVID, and that whole thing was an iatrogenic response, in my opinion. So, it relates to Howard Stern. I think Glenn is spot on. That Howard just went crazy. He was one of those, put on your mask. You're a monster if you don't, and you want to kill grandma. The whole spiel. It was insanity. So let me know what you think. I think Glenn is spot on, and whether you're a fan or not a fan of Howard, I think his analysis is right on the money.